A big day for both Missouri Tigers football and basketball recruiting tomorrow. I'll have a preview of that. Also, what do we want to see from the football team against Southeast Missouri State? And let's put Missouri's supposed attendance woes in context. All this and more up next on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hail you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your mioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball each and every weekday during the football and basketball seasons. And this episode, I do want to tell you quickly, is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and please tell them Locked On sent you. But as I said in the tease here, tomorrow, a really big day for both programs in terms of recruiting. Well, you know the big news. The big lead has got to be Luther Burden, right? Receiver, now at East St. Louis High School. Well, I tell you, the two games I've seen of Luther so far, just the highlights, he's even better than advertised. He is a truly special, difference-making looking talent, it sure appears to me. And not just me, to everybody in the country. He's the number one ranked recruit, at least among wide receivers, according to Rivals.com, ESPN.com. Pretty darn impressive company that Missouri's in right now. And Luther tomorrow going to cut down his final 4 schools down to 3. So to me, it's almost a foregone conclusion that Missouri is going to be amongst those final 3. If I had to guess, I'd say it'll be Missouri, his previous commit, Oklahoma, and also Georgia. But who knows? Maybe Oklahoma will get the short end of the stick after getting his commitment, obviously, earlier in the process. But another big news, maybe even bigger, is because we could get an official announcement from Aidan Shaw tomorrow. A lanky 6'8", 6'9", 200-pound forward from the Kansas City, Kansas area. He'd be a huge get for the Tigers. Maybe the highest ranked guy Conzo Martin has gotten since Michael Porter Jr., Jeremiah Tillman, Jonte Porter, that whole class. So an enormous get if Aidan Shaw indeed signs with Missouri, commits to Missouri, I should say. Let's not totally jump the gun, right? But I think if Shaw commits tomorrow, wherever he commits, I think it sounds like he's going to make a final decision. All indications are leaning toward Missouri, but we'll just have to see. To me, Shaw is the kind of guy that Missouri has really needed for a long time. You need sort of a multi-talented, but yet, in that 6'8", 6'9" range forward. That kind of player just gives you so much versatility offensively and defensively by opening up the court offensively, number one, and number two, defensively, just giving you the kind of versatility to guard multiple positions and not get caught in bad matchups. I mean, really, I honestly believe you have to have that type of player in this day and age if you're going to win big. So Aidan Shaw potentially committing tomorrow. We'll see what happens. Sounds like it's going to be about 10:30 in the morning. Being streamed somewhere, I'm not sure. CBS, something or other. Sorry, I don't have that information. Obviously, I'm not that interested to watch it live. But I'll tell you what, tomorrow on Locked On Mizzou, if Aidan Shaw commits, we'll have all the information for you, and I'll have an even further breakdown on that young man's basketball game. And since we're on the topic of recruiting, let's give a little more context to something Eli Drinkwitz was talking about in the run-up to the Kentucky game. And I think this is important because I've noticed a lot of Mizzou fans, people I talk to, in fact, about the Tigers, well, to me, they seem a little bit entitled, at least when it comes to the Kentucky Wildcats. For whatever reason, Missouri fans think Apparently, they're still stuck in 2002 when Kentucky was a joke of a football program. But you know what? That is no longer the case, and Missouri fans shouldn't feel entitled to beat Kentucky every year just because they think they're a blue blood basketball school that doesn't take football seriously. Now, don't get me wrong, Kentucky is unlikely to ever be LSU or Alabama or even Auburn or Tennessee, at least in terms of overall interest in their programs. But just to add some more context to where Missouri is in their rebuild cycle versus where Kentucky's program is, they're well down the tracks. This is a point Eli was trying to make, and Gabe DeArmond over at Power Mizzou about a week ago had some really good context here. He's the big recruiting expert. He knows this stuff, and what he knows, and anybody knows who's honest with themselves, is the more 4- and 5-star players you can get, the better chance you have to win in the long run. So, in the last 5 cycles from 2017 to 2021, so that includes guys who are true freshmen this season, Kentucky has signed 22 of those coveted 4- and 5-star players. Meanwhile, Missouri has signed 9. So that's less than half of what Kentucky has on its current roster. And of those 9 4- and 5-star players, by the way, only 4-star players in Missouri's case, of those 9 4-star guys currently on Missouri's roster, 5 of them, that's over half, are true freshmen. So again, while I absolutely believe that Eli Drinkwitz definitely can close that talent gap on Kentucky, in fact, if he keeps this pace up, he's going to eventually surpass Kentucky in terms of overall talent. You got to have a little bit of patience. It's not going to happen overnight. Once again, 5 true freshmen, 5 stars on the roster right now. Only really Dominique Lovett has gotten significant playing time, and obviously he's got some kinks to work out. He's a true freshman. The guy was in high school this time last year. It's going to take time. I know we wish we could all microwave the process. That's not going to happen. And also, again, as Missouri fans, take a step back for a second. Give Kentucky some credit because they and mostly Mark Stoops has built one heck of a football program considering where they came from. And coming up, I'd like to talk about what I want to see from Missouri this Saturday against Southeast Missouri. We're all assuming a win, right? I know Eli Drinkwitz is telling us not to, but as fans, it's hard not to, right? So what should we look for in a game that is a likely blowout? Let's be honest. I want to talk about all that, but first, our title sponsor is RockAuto.com, and I'll tell you, this is the place to go to save yourself some time, save yourself some money, especially if you're a DIY-minded kind of car guy. I'll be totally honest, I'm not the biggest DIY mechanic in the world, to say the least, but there's still a few things I know how to do here and there. So if you're going to change a filter in your engine, maybe you just need to replace a brake light, something relatively simple like that. Well, guess what? RockAuto.com has you covered with the best prices you can get, an easy-to-use website where they don't even ask you to sign up for yet another login where you have to have, click this, drag that, blah, blah, blah. None of that stuff at RockAuto.com. Just find what you want, check out, and go home. So when you go to RockAuto.com to see all the parts available for your vehicle, please do write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. So obviously, if the Southeast Missouri State game is a nail-biter going in late third quarter, early fourth quarter, something has gone wrong. We can all admit that. Despite what Eli Drinkwitz said, he's putting over Southeast Missouri as a team that has blocked 12 kicks in the past 3 seasons, for instance. Also a good rushing team by his estimation. But you know what? From my experience, unless you're actually an FCS team that is at the very least in the top 25, you're probably not going to have much of a prayer. Some of those upper echelon, top 5, top 10 type FCS programs, yeah, they can pull off an upset, especially against a lower rung, upper major type Power 5 team. It can happen. We saw it happen this year. Washington just got knocked off. So I'm glad that Eli Drinkwitz is taking the angle that he is with his football team. He shouldn't be telling these guys, hey, this is an automatic victory. But you know what? I'm a fan, and I don't need to get psyched for this game, so let's take a more realistic look at it. Hopefully, we pounded Southeast Missouri into submission by the second half. So beyond just the obvious, we want to see a big win. What do we want to see? Well, to me, we've taken a decent amount of deep shots in these first 2 games, and a few of them have been just off the mark. One to Mookie Cooper in the last game against Kentucky. A couple notably, certainly, in the Central Michigan ball game. Dominique Lovett, a couple balls just off the mark from connecting, in my opinion, between Connor Bazelak and Lovett. But considering Mookie Cooper should be getting healthier, Lovett should be getting more experience. And again, one of those balls that was just off the mark against Central Michigan, I should put this video out on Twitter. There's a great shot that I captured of Lovett just absolutely making one of the quickest moves off the line of scrimmage you'll see in college football. This guy not only has good straight line speed, he has a suddenness to his game, to his quickness that I really think is going to eventually translate. There's a reason the guy's playing as a true freshman. He just needs a little bit more time to get experience and get his feet wet. Hopefully this Southeast Missouri game is a good opportunity for him and Connor to get on the same page. Same thing with Mookie Cooper, of course, and frankly, all of the receivers. Chisholm, Dove, the whole gang. Also, frankly, offensively, we need to dominate the line of scrimmage, especially Missouri's backs. Especially Missouri's offensive line. I want to see them push the pile forward consistently, which is not something they've been able to do, obviously, in the first 2 weeks. And frankly, again, I accidentally mentioned the backs there. Well, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I want to see Tyler Beatty get some rest. Now, as a head coach, there's an interesting balance here because Tyler Beatty currently is your national scrimmage yards leader. Now, on one hand, you'd love to get your player some more stats to pad those stats and get the attention of national writers and people who can't necessarily watch every single snap of every game. Certainly Missouri games, for the most part, are going to fall into that category. I hate to say it. So what pops to people, national writers, national observers, analysts? Well, big-time statistics. The sort of traditional statistics that I posited recently are fairly meaningless for the most part. So to me, if you're Eli Drinkwitz, if Beatty breaks off an early 65-yard touchdown run, gets a little bit of statistics, gets that SportsCenter highlight, let's maybe park that car in the garage for the rest of the game and take out one of the newer models, like, say, Eli Young. I'd like to see Eli get going, maybe have a breakout game for 100 yards rushing, get him 15 to 20 touches in this ball game, and see what he can do. Now, for as much as Eli Drinkwitz has said that Tyler Beatty's workload isn't something he's particularly concerned about at this point, and he's going to take it game by game, play by play, I don't see how you can't look at this SEMO game and think, man, I really need Beatty for the rest of this season. Let's take this moment to maybe roll some of those miles back on the odometer as I use yet another car analogy. How about that, rockauto.com? Who says I'm not a car guy? But you know what? Not only just Eli Young, I'd like to see some of the other running backs too, whether it's Mike Cox or Taj Butts or whoever it might be. I'd like to see some other guys out there. No offense to Dawson Downing, by the way. That guy certainly deserves some reps. But at this point, we kind of know what we have in Dawson Downing. He's been in the program for 5-6 years now. I'd like to see some of the younger guys and just get a better idea of what they can do. And finally, I'd like to see a little bit more from the other Tulsa cornerback transfer, Greene. In fact, I have a nice email here from a listener named Dustin. He says, "Hey, John, longtime listener, really enjoy your stuff. What is the best way to ask you questions about the show? I've been dying to ask your opinion on why Greene hasn't been getting many snaps in the first 2 games." Well, you know what, Dustin? That's a good question. First of all, if you do want to contact the show, easiest way, just email me at lockedonmizzou@gmail.com or hit me anywhere, direct message on social media, though quite frankly, I'm on Twitter more often than not, much more so than the Facebook or the Instagram, as it were. So yeah, Twitter DMs at Locked On Mizzou, as it says here on my fancy YouTube graphic, by the way. Or again, lockedonmizzou@gmail.com. And you know what, Dustin? I'm going to tease the answer to your Greene question and first tell you about my friends at SweatBlock. Yes, still looking like a hot day this Saturday. Fortunately, a little bit of an early kickoff if you're anti-sweating. But guess what? I've got an even better solution for you. Of course, it's the doctor-created, doctor-recommended SweatBlock wipes that work for up to 7 days per use. Their dry shirt guarantee. If SweatBlock doesn't keep you dry, well, guess what? You get your cheddar back. Featured and tested on the Rachel Ray Show by real honest-to-goodness firefighters. So if it's good enough for somebody running into a burning building, the big heroes of our country, you know what? I think it's probably good enough for armchair quarterbacks like me and you. So again, SweatBlock is where it's at. If you or somebody you love is dealing with a little bit of sweat issues, check it out. Get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code Locked On, or again, check it out on Amazon or at CVS. And by BetOnline.ag. Yes, our friends at BetOnline have you covered for all things betting. And you know what? I have some opinions this weekend. Yes, occasionally I use this as my own segment, and here it goes. I think Alabama covers, number one. I think we talk ourselves into, down in the swamp, blah, blah, blah. To me, that defense for Florida doesn't have enough to hold up. So give me Alabama minus 15. Also, I don't think LSU does cover against Central Michigan. What evidence do we have, by the way? LSU a 20-point favorite in this ball game. I'm sorry, Missouri was just favored by 13 against Central Michigan, and they didn't cover. So what evidence do we have that LSU is 7 points better, that they should be 7 points more favored than the Missouri Tigers? I'm not seeing it a lot right now from LSU. So to me, go with Central Michigan and Alabama. Those are 2 decent picks. But regardless, when you sign up for your free account at BetOnline, when you actually buy in, well, you'll get a 100% welcome bonus on your deposit when you use the promo code Locked On. Once again, that's promo code Locked On for your 100% welcome bonus at BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. And now, responding to Dustin's question about Greene. You know, I wish I had some real insight to give you on Greene, quite honestly. But the truth is, I haven't seen enough of him to even analyze his game. He hasn't played enough snaps to know what he's doing well, what he's doing poorly, or anything in between. At least with a lot of these other players like, well, his former and current teammate, Caleb Evans, we've got a pretty good idea of what a Caleb can do, and frankly, so far, so good. I would just say if Allie isn't getting a lot of snaps, it means simply what Eli Drinkwitz has talked about. It sounds cliche, but he needs to practice better. He's got to be better than Ennis Rakestraw, who, by the way, was a big-time recruit from Missouri. There's a reason that Alabama was after him. I understand some Missouri fans online seem to have soured on Rakestraw a little bit. I would tell you to be a little bit more patient with that young man. I still, sure, he makes some mistakes, but I still see a lot of positives in his game as well. But again, with Allie Greene, just because, there was a few people who said, hey, maybe he's got NFL type aspirations. Well, you hear lots of guys with NFL type aspirations in the preseason. So let's pump the brakes on that idea in general a little bit. Again, hopefully against SEMO on Saturday, we'll see a little bit more of Allie Greene. And by the way, one thing I couldn't help but notice this past week watching NFL football, one game that was on, the Chargers and the Washington football team in Washington. Now, obviously, LA right now doesn't have the biggest fan base in the world, but this is a home game for Washington. And the Washington team of football, as I like to call them, the WTF, make fun of them all you want. They're still one of the most popular franchises in the NFL, which is, of course, the most popular sport in America. And yet, in week one, while the lower section of FedEx Field was 100% packed as far as I could tell, when the camera would tilt up, when you got the occasional corner of the end zone shot, somebody would score a touchdown or something, well, you could see in the background, in the upper deck of FedEx Field in Washington, there were some empty seats. Now, I understand Washington has had a lot of thin seasons the past 20 years or so, but they did make the playoffs last year. There's a lot of optimism about the football team coming into this year. There's tons of Redskins, there's tons of football team fans out there. And again, my point is if the Washington football team is having trouble filling the stands to 100% capacity in week one, coming off of a playoff season, it shouldn't be a surprise that Missouri is having trouble as well. Even the Kentucky game this past week, a really raucous Kentucky crowd, totally into that ball game. You still saw tiny pockets in the corner of the stadium of empty seats. I think that's just the reality of where sports is right now. I think it's actually a good thing that Missouri has gone backwards in terms of capacity at the football stadium. We don't need 70,000 seats anymore. If anything, create a better, more intimate environment for fewer people, so your actual fan experience when you go to the stadium, hey, it makes you want to come back. Because, again, while I noted that all the lower sections in Washington were full, hey, those are the kind of premium seats. It just seems like there's a lot less of a desire to go sit in the upper decks, in the nosebleeds anymore. I just don't think that's really that desirable to most people in this day and age when the broadcast experience, especially in the NFL, is just absolutely incredible these days. So that's something that I think every single franchise, every single college program is just going to have to deal with going forward. Even if you're Alabama, quite honestly, and you're the top program maybe of all time this run they've had, even they, while they're still filling it up, it's not like you have to pay $250 to get into the building to see them play Western Alabama State or whatever. That is no longer the case. Those type of games, frankly, in a few years, I could see it in 5 to 10 years, I think that trend continues, and I think those kind of games are just going to fall off. You're going to have to entice people more than just, hey, here's Alabama football, come enjoy it. Certainly Missouri has to deal with that reality as well. And you know what, by the way, just before we get out of here, one more interesting little note. Clayton Eckard. Hey, do you remember that name? Well, he was a Missouri tight end a few years ago. Didn't get a lot of action whatsoever. In fact, if you were like, hey, name me your favorite Clayton Eckard highlight, well, I wouldn't know what to tell you. But a kid from Eureka Springs, Missouri, apparently on The Bachelor this past season. Actually, excuse me, big time mistake there. No, I'm sorry, he was a contestant on The Bachelorette, but multiple sources now telling various outlets online that he is going to be the Bachelor for the 26th season on ABC. So how about that? A former Missouri football player will be the Bachelor with, 20 kooky young gals vying for his affection and possibly their own fame as well. I don't know, call me a cynic, but I don't know. My question for you all, when that season happens, should I be watching this show? Do you want my opinion on The Bachelor? Yes, I'll try to make it fun and entertaining and humorous, but seriously, is that good content or is that totally boring? Well, you know what? You tell me. Once again, shoot me a Twitter DM at Locked On Mizzou or anywhere on social media, or just hit me with an email, lockedonmizzou@gmail.com. So you know what? Until next time, I'm John Miller. And yeah, just quickly, got to remind you, check out Locked On Bets with your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Will they go with me on Alabama? Will they go against me on LSU? Who the heck knows? You'll just have to listen and find out for free wherever you get your podcasts. Brought to you by BetOnline AG. So until next time, I am John Miller, and thank you once again for listening to Locked On Mizzou.